Hey, Marisa. I don't think we need you for the podcast today.
Why?
I think we're good. I think we have it all taken care of.
Okay, well, one sec.
Are you going to be doing it or am I? Do you want me to do the intro?
Oh.
Yeah, we have a new host. Sorry.
Okay.
You've been kicked out.
Okay, Domino. Are you the skeptic or are you the believer?
She hasn't decided what her role is yet.
That makes sense.
What do you think, Dom? What do
You
you...
look very pretty in the seat. Oh, you're so pretty.
What do you think, Dom?
Are you recording it?
Thoughts? No thoughts?
Oh, you can lick the microphone? No, okay. Are you the new host? Hello, and welcome back to Conspiracy Couple Podcast. I'm Marisa,
And I'm Ethan.
and today we have another very interesting topic for you guys. But before we get started, Ethan has some words.
Some words. Yes. So the beginning of this podcast is re-recorded. This part right here that you're watching. And then probably about 30 to 40 minutes in, it will switch. We had already recorded this episode, but the first half of the recording got messed up and corrupted somehow. So we really liked the episode, so we didn't want to re-record the whole thing. So we're just re-recording the beginning part. We didn't want to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're re-recording the beginning so that we can, keep that, and then, we'll be wearing different clothes and looking slightly different at the end.
Yes.
And that's the reason.
Yes. Also, we had a guest co-host in the cold open. If you did not see on YouTube, you should go see because
Yes,
Domino had some things she wanted to share.
she did.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Conspiracy Couple podcast on YouTube, Conspiracy Couple podcast on Instagram and TikTok as well. Go follow us, subscribe, turn on your notifications to know when we post, all that good stuff.
And let us know if you think Domino is a skeptic, like her dad, or a believer, like me. I'm kind of tending to think she's a believer, but let us know what you guys think. So, without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and just dive right in. We're going to get into our topic. So this week on the podcast, we are going to be discussing a very perplexing true crime case. And this is the mysterious disappearance of Brandon Swanson. So Ethan, as always, before we recorded this the first time, had you heard anything about Brandon Swanson?
Nope.
No. Okay. I'm going to zoom in real fast. My old prescription is something I have to have. Okay. So, Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student in 2008 when he suddenly disappeared while he was on the phone with his parents. So, Brandon Victor Swanson was born on January 30th, 1989, to his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson. And at the time of his disappearance, he was a student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, and he had just finished his first year of school there. He was studying wind turbines at the school, which obviously that's a field of study because we have wind turbines and you have to know how to operate them. When I read that, I'm like, wow, he's studying wind turbines.
There can't be that many schools that offer that as a program, though. It feels very specific.
I feel like I would expect the school we went to offer it.
No.
Because they have a lot of wind turbines out there.
Yeah, but the school we went to was not prestigious at all. If our school did wind turbines, I would not trust any wind turbines.
Tea. That's some tea. But so he had finished his last year at that school and he was planning on transferring to another school in the fall. So May 14th, 2008, Brandon was with his friends and they were all celebrating the end of the school year. So him and his friends kind of party hopped. They went to a couple parties that evening. And the first party was located in the town of Lind, which was really close to where he lived with his family in Marshall. The second party was in a town called Canby, which was 35 miles away from his hometown, but was really close to the area where he went to school.
This is Minnesota?
Minnesota, yeah.
Okay.
So his friends reported that at the parties they saw him drinking, but that to them he didn't appear to be drunk.
Mm-hmm.
So they report that at the party in Canby, they saw him take an additional shot of whiskey, but even with that, they say he wasn't intoxicated. So around midnight, Brandon leaves the party and is heading home. So this drive was a very normal drive for him, as he was a commuter student. So he lived about 35 miles away from the campus, and he would drive in and out every day. And the drive should have taken about 30 to 40 minutes from the party. And it was a pretty easy drive. He would just get on the freeway, and he'd just basically have a straight shot back to his house. While he was driving out on a country road, he ended up driving his car into a ditch, and he wasn't able to get it out of the ditch. So this happens at about 1:15 in the morning. So something interesting that was brought up in one of the videos that I watched on this topic was what happened in the hour and from the time he left the party to the time that he started calling his friends at about 1:15. So from the party to the place where his car was found in the ditch, it was only 13 miles. And so it shouldn't have taken him that long to get from the party to the ditch.
That's assuming he left and drove straight home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the assumption that a lot of the reports and videos are making, was that he would have left the party and gone straight home.
I probably would have gone to McDonald's or something, honestly, if that were me.
That would make sense. Truthfully,
I would have found whatever
having been a
fast food
college
place
student, yeah, that would
was
make
open
sense.
and gotten something to eat.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's any evidence that he went to McDonald's, but I think that, that could be an account. He went and had something to eat.
Or looked for something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Because who knows what places are open that late.
Especially in rural
those are small towns. Yeah. Having grown up in a rural small town,
mm-hmm.
a lot of places aren't typically open super late. There's usually one.
Yeah.
And it typically was
Jack in the Box.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. It was Jack in the Box.
Yeah. Because, where we went to college, most restaurants would close at about 8 o'clock at night, 8 or 9 at night. And
on a weekend, it would be 9, yeah.
Yeah, 9 or 10 on the weekends.
9.
Yeah.
Unless it was a bar, which obviously...
Right, unless it was a bar or unless it was Jack in the Box.
Right.
Even Taco Bell closed at 11.
Yeah.
Taco Bell was not open late. But, so maybe he was looking for something to eat. So, if you will also remember, I said that his car was found on a country road. But the road that he usually drove was on the freeway. So, he wasn't on the freeway, obviously.
Right. So he was taking a back road home?
Yes, he was taking a back road, but the back road would have added more time, and it was a less direct route.
Right. So maybe he was just taking his time, doing some stargazing. It's fairly normal. When I grew up, that's, people would go out into the country roads and just stargaze because it's, you can see it, you're further away from the city lights, things like that. Does that make sense? It could be, I feel like there's lots of things that could have caused the 1 hour, thing from him only being 13 miles down the road.
Yeah. And another thing that people suspect is that he may have stayed off the main road to avoid police. Because he had been drinking. Yeah. He was underage. But according to all the witnesses, they said he wasn't impaired, that he had only, even if he had been drinking, even if he had done a shot, he wasn't in any way at risk of being impaired. Right,
but, if you somehow get pulled over for speeding or something and then they smell the alcohol, then they can have you do a breathalyzer, and then if you're over the limit at all as a minor, then that's a DWI.
And also in rural towns, I think that it's less common to see people driving around in the middle of the night. So if a police officer's out there,
yeah, I mean there's
the roads are pretty empty.
Yeah. Typically.
So the one car that drives by, they're going to be looking at.
Yeah. Those also, in my experience, those roads typically aren't heavily policed either.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit more so at the end of the school year because you're expecting maybe a little more that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, but either way, you can still understand why that might be the reason why he was going down the country road, because he's like, well, I've been drinking a little bit. And I don't want to run into the chances. Like, you could have been playing it safe. And maybe it was like, oh, it's a nice night. I want to see the stars and all that stuff.
So there's a couple explanations.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable that he would be going down that way.
Mm-hmm. But regardless, Brandon ends up in the ditch.
Right.
So he starts trying to get a hold of his friends. So he's calling his friends, trying to get them to come help him. And he isn't able to get a hold of them after trying for about 30 minutes. So after this, Brandon calls his dad. And he calls his dad, asks him for help and a ride home. And his dad gets a phone call at about 1:54 a.m. So Brandon was only located about 10 miles away from his house. But he said that he wasn't sure of his location. And he also told them that he wasn't injured, he had not been hurt following the crash into the ditch. So his parents get up, they head out to try and find him and pick him up, and he says that he's going to wait with the car for them. So he's
Smart.
He's going to stay in the car, stay with the car, and wait for his parents to come find him.
So wait, he was only 10 miles from the house?
That's what he thought.
Oh, that's what he thought. That's what he said. He was only about 10 miles? Okay.
I'm about 10 miles away from the house.
So he thought, but he was actually only 13 miles from where he left from, which you said was about 30 miles, 34?
It was like a 35, 40-minute drive.
So you could guess it probably was around 30 to 40 miles, 35 miles probably.
Especially if most of on the freeway.
He's at most halfway.
Yeah.
And more than likely a little less than halfway, but he thinks he's basically there.
Yeah, he's like, I'm pretty close.
Okay.
So, however, when they get to the area, when his parents get to the area where he said he was going to be, they couldn't find him or the car. All they saw was darkness and this like big stretch of road.
Right.
So both his parents and Brandon start flashing their headlights and honking their horns to try to help them find each other. Mm-hmm. So they're both flashing the lights, they're both honking the horns. Neither one of them see the other's lights, and neither one of them hear the other person's horn. So Brandon was heard asking, "Don't you see me? Don't you see me?" Which is like, to me, it almost makes me think that he saw lights, right? Because if he's saying like, "Don't you see me?" then wouldn't he think like they're close enough to see him?
Right. Yeah. That would be what I would think.
Mm-hmm. So the two of them, they get kind of frustrated with each other because they keep saying, "I'm flashing the lights. Don't you see me?" "No, I'm flashing my lights. Don't you see me?" "No." So they're going back and forth and back and forth.
It's like, what, 2 a.m.?
Yes, this is at 2 o'clock in the morning about. And let's just face it, his parents were probably not happy that they had to get up at 2 in the morning to go get their son from a ditch.
Right.
I mean, they did it, but they probably were, like, I could just imagine if I called my mom at 2 o'clock in the morning and was like, "Mom, I'm stuck in a ditch," her first thing would be like, "What are you doing out at 2 in the morning?"
Right.
But she would come get me, but she wouldn't be happy about it. So the two of them, they get frustrated with each other. Brandon hangs up the phone.
That could also account for why it took him so long to start. Well, you said 1:15 was when he started calling his friends. Mm-hmm. Okay, because I was going to say that could be. I mean, also could be that he was spent a good amount of time trying to push the car out or something.
May have, yeah.
But you would think he would have called his friends earlier.
He may have spent some time trying to get out.
Right, because I was thinking, oh, maybe he was trying to do everything before he called his parents, which is what I would have done. But anyway.
I would have just called my parents first.
I wouldn't if I was out that late.
Yeah. So his mom, Annette, ends up calling back, and she apologizes, and they, get back in good graces after being frustrated with each other. And they continue to talk. Brandon decides that he is just going to walk to Lind, and his dad would pick him up there.
Okay.
And so he decides this after he says that he saw lights in the distance.
How far is Lind from where he came from and where he was going? Do you know?
So he was going towards Lind.
So Lind is close to where he lives.
Yes, he was going towards Lind.
Okay.
So the first party was in Lind, and that's where his house is in Marshall.
Okay.
And they're close together.
Okay.
The second party was in Canby.
Which is about
35 miles away.
Okay.
So Brandon says that he sees lights in the distance from where he's standing with the car, and he thinks that they were coming from Lind.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, I'm just going to walk to Lind, and you can just pick me up there. So his dad drops off his mom at the house and drives toward Lind, still on the phone with Brandon the whole time. So while he was in the middle of his walk, Brandon said that he would just walk to a popular nightclub in the area, and his dad would pick him up in the parking lot there.
Okay.
And he said that he was going to cut through a field for a shortcut. And so, okay, at first I thought it was strange that he was like, pick me up in the parking lot of the nightclub. And maybe I'm assigning like a lot to this person, but that's, I think, a smart place to get picked up. Because what are the odds that any other place is going to be open and have people there
Right.
at 2, 3 in the morning?
Right.
A nightclub is going to have people there. It's probably going to have security.
Yeah.
Like, that's the safest place to go, probably.
That's what I was thinking.
I didn't even think that.
Oh.
I was just like, oh,
You were
well.
like, why a nightclub?
I was like,
Yeah.
maybe because it's like a well-known place, but
Right.
that makes sense to me now. Anyways. So he says he's going to cut through a field for a shortcut. So Brandon told his parents, or his dad, that he saw fences along his walk and that he believed he was near a river. So the two of them were on the phone for 47 minutes before the phone call abruptly ended and Brandon was never heard from again. Brandon narrated the whole time that they were on the phone. He narrated where he was walking, what he saw. The only guide that he had was the lights that he had seen ahead of him that he believed was coming from Lind. So it was very dark. There was no like street lights, anything like that. So the last thing Brandon's father heard him say before the phone disconnected was, "Oh shit." Brandon's father also thought he heard water rushing in the background and questioned whether his son slipped and fell. So Brandon's parents called him over and over and over throughout the night with the phone ringing. It would ring, and then this happened for a few hours before it started just going straight to voicemail. His family and his friends and his family also searched the area extensively for the rest of the night, but they weren't able to find any trace of him or his car. And the area was a rural area. It had a lot of farmlands. It had backcountry roads. It was just kind of like a wide open space. So 6:30 that morning, Brandon's mom, Annette, calls the local police department to try to report Brandon missing. However, the police told her that because he was a teenager and also a college kid, he probably wasn't actually missing and he was probably just out partying.
Stupid.
And his mom remembers the police said to her, he has the right to be missing.
That's so dumb, though. Because he clearly wasn't trying to be missing. He was trying to get in touch with them.
Yeah.
It's one thing if that he like left the party and didn't call them and they didn't know where he was.
Yeah.
But he called them and was actively trying to get home. He's not that he has the right to be missing doesn't apply there when it's like, oh, he was clearly trying to get back.
Yeah, exactly.
That's stupid.
And so this is unfortunately a very normal thing for adults to not be reported missing or for the police to not take these kinds of cases seriously right away, which just makes everything really tricky. And a lot of times when a person goes missing, the most important time is the first 24 hours. So after 24 to 48 hours, it's really hard to track someone down. And the likelihood of finding them alive after 48 hours is really slim.
Right.
And so most people have the belief that if an adult goes missing, they have to wait either 24 or 48 hours to report them missing. I thought that too. That not that it's like a recommendation. It's you are not able to report them missing because they won't take the report. And that's not the case. You can report them missing, but that doesn't mean that they're going to make the case a priority.
Right.
So just because you report them missing, the police might say we have X amount of resources. We're going to divert our resources to somewhere that is probably more important. because most of the time when an adult goes missing, or even when a teenager goes missing, they're found, like, fine. But most of the time is not all the time.
Yeah, I don't like that.
So eventually, after more hours of searching and after nothing keeps coming up, the police joined the search and they called in the county to help them. So Brandon's phone was still working. So the police were able to use it to get the cell phone records and find the location of his last call.
And this is, what year was this again? 2008?
2008.
That phone lasting a while is kind of...
Right.
3 days, right?
No, this is the same day.
What? I
So
thought you
this
said
is-
after
no.
48 hours.
They reported him missing at 6:30 a.m.
The day after.
at about noon that day.
Oh, the same day.
So he goes missing at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
So, okay, so...
4 hours later, they report him missing. About 6
so
hours
it's like
after
a
that.
day and a half. If you think that his phone was probably fully charged in the morning of the day he went missing.
I mean, I feel like if you're...
Still, that's a good amount of time for the phone to be working.
Yeah. So the cell phone was located in a town called Porter.
They found the cell phone?
They found the cell phone. Well, they were able to ping the cell phone. They didn't find the cell phone.
Oh, they found the cell phone, like...
Location.
Yeah,
like the
traced,
digital
the call
trace. Yeah.
was traced to that.
Yeah, so they
That's
pinged the
that's
cell
another
phone.
thing that they talk about in, like, detective shows, or like, where they're like, oh, yeah, we were able to trace the thing off this satellite, and, like, I don't understand how that works.
They can, like, so when you make a call, it goes through a cell
I know
tower.
it goes through specific cell towers and stuff.
And so they can ping the location based off of what cell
Right.
tower it went off of.
But that's still a broad location. Cell towers cover, like, a pretty wide area, don't they?
I think it depends on, like, where you live
I guess.
and what network you have, because some networks have more towers than others. Some networks are more, like...
I still feel like that's not very specific. Like, I feel like it's a pretty vast
I think it's a
area
good
that
way
it
to
could
narrow
cover.
down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the ping was in Porter. And that was 20 miles away from where he thought he was near Lind and where he had told his family he was. So with this, Porter becomes a search area.
Mm-hmm.
So later that afternoon at around 12:30 p.m., police found his car in a ditch in the area, but there was no trace of Brandon or any signs of foul play.
Interesting.
Police said that the position of the car would make it so that Brandon wouldn't be able to get enough traction to drive himself out of the ditch. So he was essentially stuck. They also said that the car was not damaged, just a little muddy, and the doors were open with the keys missing when it was found.
Okay. That's a little odd.
So the problem is that nobody knows what direction he walked after he got out of the car.
Right, because you could see lights.
Right, so there's no
He said he could see
indication
lights.
that they're like, oh, when he left, he went here. It's just like he left and he walked somewhere. We don't know where he walked.
Mm-hmm.
So the search was pretty intense after it started. So they brought in the canine unit, bloodhounds. They had people searching on horseback, people searching in helicopters, people searching on ATVs. And the canines led the team about 3 miles away from the river before stopping and losing the scent. So the dog went up to the river about 3 miles in, went into the river, and then came back out. And however, none of his clothes, none of his personal belongings were found along the search area. So after a 3-week search, there was no sign of Brandon found in the area. It seemed that he had just disappeared without a trace. So the search continued and the search radius expanded, but some areas were unable to be searched because local farmers refused to allow the canine teams onto their property. So
That's kind of fair.
So that was during planting and harvesting season.
Yeah.
But the fact that these areas were so large left really big holes in the search. And we do have to assume that if these farmers were genuinely good citizens who just didn't want the police to mess up their harvesting, which makes sense because that's their livelihood.
Right.
If they, we have to assume that if they would have found any evidence of Brandon or any evidence of something that might have belonged to him on their farms, that they would have informed the police. We have to assume that. But of course, we can't confirm that because those areas were not searched.
Right.
And so it's easy to say, oh, they're the villain. But when you think about farmers, it's a very it's a very, I guess,
Yeah,
it's kind of like a fragile,
It's understandable, but also kind of frustrating given that they were trying to find somebody.
Right. Right. So those are the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the theories, I do want to point out that Brandon was considered to be a healthy adult, a healthy young man with no history or sign of any mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get into some of the theories. The most popular theory is that Brandon fell and ended up in the river. So
How big of a river was it?
So in some places, the river was only up to your knees, and other places it was 15 feet tall, like deep.
Okay.
And so it just kind of would vary how deep it was. So this theory goes into two different directions after this. He fell into the river, he drowned, and his body was dragged downstream. The second, he fell into the river, he climbed out of the river, and then later died of hypothermia.
But wouldn't the dogs be able to find his scent?
Right. So in both theories, it would have been highly likely that he would have had his body found.
Yeah, because even if he got dragged down the river, like if I'm assuming that
they went to the end of the river.
They searched the river.
They did. Mm-hmm.
And like if there's parts of the river that are like knee length, his body would have been found.
Right. And so the police deployed boat teams to search the river. They found nothing. The police didn't find any remains in the area they searched, let alone Brandon's remains.
If he died somewhere, like, you would have think that the dogs would have found it.
Right.
Because it gives off quite a stench, and those dogs are trained to
They're
smell
bloodhounds.
those kind of things.
Right, yeah. So the dogs did track his scent to the edge of the river, but the track stopped there, which led police to believe that he managed to get out of the river. However, it was around 39 degrees that night. So that's cold.
Not cold enough for hypothermia.
But if he was soaking wet. So if he had fallen into the river, gotten wet, it's possible that he may have succumbed to hypothermia.
I guess. It depends on like how long he was in the river for.
And this is a possibility.
Yeah.
Right? So we're looking at this as a possibility. And police believe that if he would have fallen into the river while he was on the phone with his dad, the phone would have stopped working once it got into the water.
Right.
The phone was still ringing until later that day.
Did they ever find his phone?
I don't think so. I don't believe they didn't find anything that belongs to him except for the car. They didn't find his keys. They didn't find his body. They didn't find his clothes. They didn't find his wallet. They didn't find his phone. And so that one is the most popular one, but
I guess I can buy the hypothermia one because maybe he wandered out far enough into the wilderness that it was difficult to find. But
could have been, yeah.
I just kind of feel like the dogs would have still been able to smell him even after he went in the river.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is his scent going to be dampened that much by the water?
I don't know. I don't know.
I guess I don't really know how that works.
I don't really know how water impacts that. But you'd think that if he wandered out another place, there would have been like marks where he like climbed out of the river. I don't know. You would think that there'd be some kind of evidence.
And also you would think that if his phone was still working, he would have called his dad again.
Right. That if he gets out of the river and he walks around, his phone is still working.
Right. Well, there's evidence. We know that his phone is still working. So you would have thought, unless he dropped his phone and didn't know where it was.
Which is possible.
Yeah. But then you would have thought he would have spent some time around there looking for his phone. Therefore, the dog's been able to pick up his scent again.
Right. But we're going to talk more about that. So another theory is that he fell into a well or into a cistern somewhere in the area.
So, like, fell into a hole, got trapped in there.
And couldn't get out.
Yeah.
So this theory was proposed by a volunteer firefighter named Darren Delzer. So he said that Brandon was actually legally blind in his left eye. And he had to wear glasses in order to see.
Right.
So that day, he had forgotten to grab his glasses, and he had left them in the car. And so it took me a little bit of research, but the glasses were apparently found in the car.
Okay.
And so Delzer says that Brandon said, "Not another fence," just before he said, "Oh shit," and that Brandon fell into an unmarked well or cistern because he couldn't see without his glasses. So this is something that's really been prickling in the back of my mind. So I am someone who wears glasses. Now, I'm not legally blind in one of my eyes, but I have to wear glasses or contacts or else I can't see. Like, I can see, but I can't see. So, as someone who has vision that's not quite as bad as Brandon's, I don't forget my glasses.
Right.
I have never forgotten my glasses ever since I started wearing them.
Also, he was driving, which I guess maybe that explains why he got in the ditch.
Right. But here's the thing. I started wearing glasses when I was 8 years old. Ever since that time, I have never once forgotten to put my glasses on.
But you've never been in a ditch on the phone with your dad trying to find him while also potentially a little bit intoxicated.
But here's the thing. So I have also drank in the past, and even shocking, a 27-year-old who has drank in the past. But I have drank in the past. Even
in the past.
In my recent history.
Anyway.
I still know that I have to be able to see, like, I have to put my glasses on.
I'm just saying he's in a scenario where he's potentially a little bit stressed. I'm not saying that I think that fully explains why he left his glasses. I'm saying there's a scenario in which you can understand, like, maybe the glasses weren't, especially because he seemed to think that he was a lot closer to town than he was. So he thinks, oh, okay, I see these lights. I'm just going to go now. I see them, right? Again, not saying that like, yes, you would think that he would have remembered to grab his glasses or something like that. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm just saying that it's not like completely out of the realm of possibility that he just left them. Especially because his car's in the ditch. Maybe he doesn't know where they are. Like, it's just like, it's a very but the thing is, they're in the car. Right. That's like it's not that he fell into the river and then the glasses were found in the river. Right. No, yeah. This is like something that is very troubling to me, because even when I'm wearing contacts, like if I'm going out to dinner and I'm wearing contacts, I usually will have my glasses in my purse just in case my contacts get irritated or something. Yeah. Like, I plan everything I do around my glasses. I know. I'm just saying. I agree. I agree that it is weird. You would think that he would have brought his glasses. I'm just saying it's not like this is something that's impossible. And this also kind of raises the question of something that I saw was like, well, the witnesses, his friends at the party, how honest were they being about how much they had seen him drink? Because he's 19. Were they worried that if they said more, he'd get in trouble? Or they'd get in trouble. Or they'd get in trouble. Right. And so that's something that maybe he was more impaired. Well, that's something that you see happen, and like something that, because when you go to universities, at least the university we went to, and I think most like public universities at least, they'll have you go through like essentially it's like a drug and alcohol use like seminar. Yeah. It was online for us, but basically they address, because when someone has been drinking or using drugs or something and they're underage, if they have a medical emergency, people are hesitant to call paramedics because they don't want to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And the thing is like, you won't get in trouble if you call because your friend is dying. Like, that's the thing that they say is like, this is most important. The most important thing is that you help your friend. Mm-hmm. But also, but at the same time, my point being, like, that's a very real fear that people have. Like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to, like, I'm not 21. I'm not going to. Or even if, like, let's just say that some of the friends were 21. Right. You could go to jail for supplying alcohol to a minor. Yeah. So it definitely is. You have to wonder how honest were they being about how intoxicated he was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And so that leads to the question of, like, well, was he actually, like, more impaired? Was he blah, blah, blah? But the thing is... Oh, and also, how well do they know? Like, did they see every single drink he drank? Right. Like, you don't know. And did also, they see what he ate before? Did he, like, right. All of these things that impacted? And also, like, you don't know how much alcohol is going to affect somebody. Like, we don't... I mean, obviously, I'm assuming it's not in your research, but it's, like, how... What was his tolerance? Yeah, like, was this like the first time he drank, or like he drank a little bit before? Or, like, you don't know. Yeah, but the thing is, his parents say he did not sound intoxicated on the phone. Right. And you can fake it pretty well. Well, and I also buy kind of that he had sobered up a little bit. Regardless, like, we don't know how drunk he was at his drunkest. But, like, given the fact that it had been at least an hour that he'd been gone from the party, you can assume that he'd sober up a little bit.
And maybe
That
that's why I
also-
took the country road so we could drive around and, like...
Right. But, and also, like, just because you're not blacked out drunk or not, like, over the legal limit or whatever, like, a little bit of impairment is a little bit of impairment. It impairs your judgment. There's a reason it's, like...
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that there is a limit.
Yeah.
And so it just, yeah. All this to say, there's reasons to believe that he might not have been thinking straight, regardless of how much he drank or whatever,
Right.
you know?
And unmarked wells or cisterns are common in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's dark, it's not unlikely that he might have tripped into one, regardless of whether he was wearing his glasses or whether he had been drinking or whether he was drunk.
Right.
When it's dark, you just can't see as well.
It's true.
And especially out in, like, rural country areas,
There's
there's
no
stuff
lights.
in the ground.
And there's no lights for you
There's
to...
no lights.
Like, it's not like there's lampposts or
No,
anything.
there's no lights.
He sees light in the distance, and he has the stars or, you know, the moon, depending on how cloudy it is. Like, that's all the light
That's
you
it,
get.
yeah. And it's usually there's, like, overgrowth, and so it's kind of hard to see, like, what's hiding underneath there.
Yeah.
But then you have to think, if he had fallen into a well or cistern, unless it was on one of the properties that wasn't allowed to be searched,
Right.
wouldn't the dogs have picked it up?
Well, and also, it's like, I mean, how did he fall in without his phone also coming with him?
The phone would have come with him
Right.
because,
But so then you would think that he would have called.
or maybe he
Be like, yeah, I
fell
fell in
deep
the-
and he died.
I guess that's possible, yes.
But then, don't you think that his dad would have heard him, like, hit the ground or something?
Yeah, I guess. I guess it depends on, like, how he fell and...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would think if he fell, there's not a lot that disconnects a phone call. Unless he fell, but no, you know he had service because they were receiving the calls. I don't know. Yeah.
That's another aspect.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that's kind of just going to be everything with this because
Yeah.
there's no evidence. And when there's no evidence, everything is possible.
That's true. Another theory is that he was involved in either a hit and run or, like, an abduction or a murder, and that he ended up dying,
Right.
and that the people responsible disposed of his remains.
Yeah.
So,
Hit and run doesn't make sense because he wasn't in the road.
well, we don't know that.
Well,
He doesn't know that.
but
So-
but they followed his scent to the river, so he walked off the road. And then you say it was 3 miles off the road?
3 miles off the road. When did you hear that?
When you said how far the dogs went out,
They went to the river.
which was
Now let me go back to my
Didn't you say it was
script.
3 miles from the road?
Let me go back to my notes.
Yeah, because I thought you said that it was 3 miles.
3 miles away from the river.
Oh, from the river.
So,
Anyway,
in
I
this
don't know what to
case,
say.
there's no evidence of foul play, but there's no evidence of anything. And so you can't say,
Could
well, there's no
be.
evidence. Something that I saw in a lot of YouTube comments that kind of stuck out to me. Now, the YouTube comments are a great place to get alternate theories.
The YouTube comments are a great place to get something.
No, I found a lot of really good theories in YouTube comments. So when Brandon said, "Oh shit," and then fell,
You're going to make me stop saying it. I don't
sorry,
want to
it's
have
a
to keep
central
bleeping.
part of this story. So it could have been that instead of slipping into the river or, like, slipping, he could have been hit by someone and then knocked down.
I feel like he would have known if he was in the road, though.
No, but this isn't just that he was hit by a car.
Oh.
This could be that he was hit by a person,
I guess.
like a murderer,
Yeah.
a night stalker.
But what were they doing out there?
And that's another thing, was he doesn't know where he was, so they would have had to follow this boy.
Right.
Or he
And they
just
followed him for 47 minutes while he was on the phone
or
with his parents.
they just happened to be in the place to find this young man
out on the back roads
out
in the middle
back
of
roads.
nowhere?
Right.
I don't
So
buy it.
he could have been hit by someone knocked down. So we do have to take into account that although there was a very extensive search for him, there were some farmers that did not allow the
Right.
police to search on their land. So even though
maybe
there
he-
is a reasonable
yeah.
explanation for that, it could be suspicious. It could be that maybe someone was pissed
be.
off that he was trespassing
Yeah.
and they saw him on their land, he was trespassing, and they took care of it.
Again, though, don't you think that they would have heard... Never mind. I guess I was gonna say, like, you would think that the dad would have heard the sound of someone hitting him or whatever happened, but that you could also, if, let's say, potentially we're gonna say he was accidentally trespassing and was a farmer or somebody's property, he could have said, oh blank, oh bleep, because I don't want to do any more editing.
Sorry.
Oh bleep, and then hung up to try and talk to this person, and then whatever happened.
But don't you think he would have been like, hey, Dad, I gotta go?
Not necessarily. Like, if somebody has a gun on you.
Oh, I guess that's true.
If somebody is like, hey, what are you doing on my... Or like, what are you... You're walking and then you come up to somebody's property.
And you're like kind of a little bit intoxicated still.
And you come up on somebody's property and then they're just like, they see you, they're standing out there pointing a gun at you. You're like, oh, bleep, I gotta deal with this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Also, the lights that he saw, because he didn't have his glasses, the lights that he saw could have been car lights, could have been someone's house lights.
Could have been an alien spacecraft.
Could have been, probably not. Could have been like someone's house. And so he starts walking towards this person's house because he thinks that it's a town. Yeah. Right. The problem is with the car hit and run. If he would have been hit by a car, his dad would have heard the car. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, the dad would have heard that.
Yeah.
He might not have heard an angry person who he was on their property.
Yeah.
Another theory is that he was attacked by wild animals. This is a rural area. There are wild animals there, but it's likely that if he was attacked by some kind of an animal, there would have been some kind of a trace of him. And
also, you would have thought that I wouldn't just hang up my phone if an animal's, attacking me. That's not like your first reaction.
I don't think you just swear. I think you'd scream, and you'd probably hear like,
you're like, ah, a wolf! Is it? There's a wolf. You wouldn't just be like, oh, beep.
I don't think I'd say there's a wolf. I'd probably just scream, and then you'd probably hear like, Rawr! Like the snarling animal.
Yeah.
That's probably what you'd hear. I sounded just like a wolf.
You would hear something that would lead you to believe that. More than just him exclaiming something.
Yeah. Another theory is that he had some kind of a mental breakdown. So this is still not a theory on its own.
No.
Because it only accounts for the mental state. It does not account for what happened after the mental breakdown.
Well, and then there's no evidence for that because by all accounts, he was hanging out with his friends. He was talking to his parents. Like,
yeah,
there's no evidence of any sort of mental breakdown.
He was on the phone with his parents.
When somebody's having a mental breakdown, there are like signs and things that they go through, and
especially immediately before.
Right, and you're telling me he's having a mental breakdown, and he's just like, hey, can you come pick me up? To his parents, like that doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's not. There's no evidence to say that he was having a mental breakdown. He seems pretty. Even though he's not necessarily making the smartest decisions, he seems pretty sound of mind.
Right. His parents said he seemed fine. He sounded normal. Mm. His friends at the party said he seemed fine. He seemed normal. And so it's only a half theory, right?
That's a bad one.
So the last theory is that he staged his own disappearance. That for some reason, he left the area purposefully to create this new identity, to live under a new name, and that he staged the whole thing, and this is because there's no evidence. However, he was trying to be found.
Right.
He was on the phone with his parents to have them come pick him up.
I mean, I guess you can make the argument he was faking that.
Okay, but if you're going to disappear mysteriously, if you're like, okay, I'm going to disappear and start a new life, why would you wake your parents up at 2 o'clock in the morning, talk to them on the phone for 50 minutes before? Why not just disappear?
Go in the extra mile in the story?
It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's like he was clearly someone that was trying to be found.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying you could make the argument he was just faking the whole thing.
There's also no reason to suggest that he would want to disappear. There's nothing that was like, he seemed fine. He had good friends. He was doing well in his school. He was transferring to a university. He was excited about that.
No, there's no evidence to believe that. And I'm not saying I do believe that, but you could get,
you're playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So
again, like that's the thing. The lack of evidence lends itself to many possibilities.
True. So still to this day, there has been no evidence found beyond the car.
Which is odd.
Right. Nothing has been found except for the car. But police believe that it's likely his remains are within a 122 square mile search radius.
If he died.
Right. So in 2009, Minnesota actually passed something called Brandon's Law, which was spearheaded by his parents, and it required authorities to immediately begin an investigation if a person is reported missing, regardless of age, if they disappear under dangerous circumstances. As Brandon's parents believe that this case would have been solved sooner, or it would have been solved at all, if police didn't tell them to wait for a while.
I guess you could.
I think that yeah. So basically,
and obviously, I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, the parents or loved ones of somebody who goes missing, you want action to be taken as soon as possible, because it is true. The sooner you act, the sooner a conclusion is met. Sooner, like, you can find the person or discover what happened. The longer you wait, the harder it is to solve this.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. And basically this law changed like how it dealt with child disappearance cases. And so it changed the word child to person.
So instead of
to
it being
include,
if a child is missing, to be if anybody is missing, essentially.
Yes, under like specific circumstances.
Which I think is how it should be. That 100%. Makes sense to me. And it's like, I get that, yes, maybe they're not actually missing. But why take that risk?
Right.
Why take the risk that they might be missing if somebody is kidnapped, if somebody is like hurt? If you wait to act, then they could be gone. You're never finding them. They could die. If you act immediately, you might actually be able to find them.
There's nothing bad that will come from acting too fast.
Right.
Right. Like, it's the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, "Oh, sorry, I thought I got you guys involved in this missing persons case when I was actually just staying at my friend's house."
But shouldn't you rather be safe than sorry?
Yeah.
You should, in my mind, the extra precautions should be taken. There's going to be cases where the person isn't actually missing, but guess what? That's okay.
But that's still a win because they're still fine.
There also is going to be cases when you do act and you find them, whatever happened, whether Brandon would have been found or not,
we don't know. Yeah.
The likelihood would have been raised if they acted immediately.
So, Ethan, as we conclude, I want to know, what do you think of this case? What do you think happened?
I don't know. There's no way to know. And that's really unfortunate. It's really sad. It sucks because it's like he seems like he was. Yeah, he seems like everything was fine. There was no reason to believe that anything like this would have happened. The likelihood is that it was some sort of accident, whether he fell into the river, whether he, got caught in a old well or something like that, whether he was attacked by animals or a person or anything. Whatever happened, it probably was just he got stuck in this situation, and it's really sad and really unfortunate. And it's honestly kind of baffling that there's been no evidence found, and that's why I do understand why people are thinking, oh, maybe he faked it, because the lack of evidence is crazy. But no one's that good at covering up.
And I feel like, especially in today's day and age.
Right.
And we live in the digital age.
And also, this is a 19-year-old college student in Minnesota. He doesn't have the means to just disappear.
Assume a new identity.
Yeah, he can't do that on his own. So it's like, if he did do that, then there's either he went into witness protection for some reason, or, something like that. Like, he doesn't have the capabilities to just disappear. I think sometimes people underestimate how difficult that is. It's like, you can't just print yourself a new passport and leave, take all your, what do you need? Money, you need resources, you need somewhere to stay. It's those more out there ones I definitely don't buy, but it's tough. Tough to say.
I think, and I'm actually going to differ from the mainstream idea of what happened. I think that he could have been murdered.
Oh.
The mainstream one is he got into, he fell. He fell into a river.
That it was an accident?
Yes. Yeah. I think that he could have been murdered. Because knowing that there was so much land that was not searched, knowing that he was impaired, knowing that he's in the country, right, and he's walking towards lights, I wouldn't be surprised if he walked onto someone's property.
I'm honestly surprised they weren't able to get warrants to search those fields.
I don't know. Maybe because there's no cause. Like, they don't have a justifiable cause.
But you know he was at least in the area.
I don't know. But I honestly think that he could have been murdered. Since there's no evidence, to me it's like someone probably covered something up.
Yeah.
I don't think he fell into a river because I think where would his phone have gone? Like, wouldn't the river, like if he's on the phone, holding his phone and then he falls? I mean, I don't know. I think there's just a lot of, if he would have fallen in the river, he would have gotten back out. I feel like they would have found something.
Yeah.
I think that he probably accidentally wandered onto someone's property. You know, it was a angry farmer. You know, trespassers will be shot.
Yeah.
And I think that they ended up just covering it up.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, like, I don't know. Like, I'm not like, oh, I'm firm in this. That just
You're not trying to be a social media sleuth.
No, I just think that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
With the no evidence we have. But I do think it's crazy that there's nothing. That to me reveals like it was probably a carried out thing as opposed to nature, because nature doesn't, I mean, it can cover up that stuff, but I don't know. We want to know what you guys think. Mm-hmm. What do you think of this case? What do you think happened to Brandon? Of course, if you have any information about that, then you can certainly still submit that to like the FBI or the police department. But let us know what you think. This is a very troubling and perplexing case. Yes. So let us know in the comments. Let us know however you want to let us know. And thank you guys for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.